Through this, good board of supervisors committees and subcommittees are subject to the Alaska Open Meetings Act. It's found in Alaska Statute 44.62.310 and Anchorage Municipal Code 1.25 public meetings. The board of supervisors operates the public meeting standards of conduct. Call the meeting to order at 4:01. Let's do something different. Brian, since you're new here, Brian, would you like to read the land acknowledgement for us?
Yes, I will. Land acknowledgement. The Girdwood Board of Supervisors acknowledges the indigenous peoples of Alaska, whose land we reside on. The community of Girdwood, situated between the areas known to be Dena'ina and Aluk homeland, respects the people who were stewards of this land for generations. We commit to the continued stewardship of this land and are grateful for the part of a wider community that seeks to maintain a sustainable use of Girdwood Valley, present and future.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We'll now go through a roll call, first of all, for GBOS. So my name is Mike Edgington, co-chair and Housing and Development Supervisor. Jennifer?
Jennifer Wingard, Land Use.
Thank you. And Brian?
Brian Burnett, Parks and Rec.
Thank you. Brianna will be about 15 minutes late, and Guy had a work meeting which ended up getting scheduled last minute, so he's not expecting to be here until close to 5. You'll call. GHEC, would you like to introduce yourself, members of GHEC? You can start here.
Crystal Hoke.
Barry Daniels. Brett Wolbank.
Matt Schechter.
Okay. Is there anyone online? Not from GHEC. Okay, thank you, everyone. I'll say disclosures, but we can address those if they come up. First of all, I seek a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Motion to approve.
Thank you.
No, does it need to be through GBOS?
I guess technically, yeah.
Okay, sorry.
I'll move to approve.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any objections? Not hearing anyone. Not hearing any objections. We will approve the agenda. Announcements. Public is encouraged to ask questions, provide comment. Please raise your hand and wait to be acknowledged, either online or in person. To help discussions stay productive, please direct your comments to the board rather than other members of the public, and keep your comments focused on the business under discussion. Please be respectful of everyone's opinions. Although we are scheduled as a formal meeting, as a regular meeting, I think this makes a little bit more sense to run as a workshop. So we'll, or work session rather. So we'll do something in between. If someone wants to create a motion, they can. But the assumption is we'll discuss rather than take action. Okay, let's start with item number 1, the goals for GBSA. I will briefly introduce this, very briefly. So in our packet, we have a housing action plan that was put together by the Assembly, which we should be somewhat consistent with. Housing vision goals and policies put forward by the Good and Comprehensive Plan, again, we should be somewhat consistent with. At least one brief page, which was an initial housing assessment from the Comprehensive Plan. Some suggestions that came up in an earlier meeting, and a set of objectives and goals from various other plans. And then finally, just a one-page quick thing on SMART goal templates. So that's sort of material which I'm sure some of you considered previously, some it's new to, that we've seen that are either relevant plans or relevant discussion today. And really the intent of this is to see if we can come up with at least initial set of either goals or objectives for our housing policy in general. So I think as individuals, it's easy to see particular policies we want to follow. And I think what makes sense is for us, the bodies, to have a broader set of goals that we sort of evaluate everything within. So we have a kind of longer term intent, and then we can address policies as we go along. So anyone start this conversation who wishes to do so? Thank you, Chris.
So I'm looking at this May 13th Girdwood housing goals suggestions, just in, reading through these, like I'm in support of 1, increase the proportion of occupied primary housing residents. That's good with me. Increase the availability of stable short-term rentals. That's good. Encourage step-up housing for affordable ownership. That's good. Maximize the utility of existing housing stock. This is the only one that I would have more questions about specifically. Or maybe just like clarifying exactly what that means. Number 5, when development is required, use public lands to meet public good is fabulous. Develop local organizational capacity necessary to track goals and implement the required policies and programs. I think I'm generally in support of that, but want a little bit more information as to what that means. So anyway, I think like this is a really good start to work off of, but want a little bit more clarification about a couple.
The one question I'd have for you is what's missing?
Land.
So, I mean, that's a good point. So is there something we should put in with respect to land and control of land?
So, yeah, I would say, I mean, really, it's up at the top as far as priorities for me, but definitely if we're gonna just add to this list, 7 would be secure site control for community-specific housing projects or for the intended purpose of providing community housing. And that could look like a withdrawal from HLB.
I'm just making notes. Okay, any other comments on this or thoughts on whether we should start from here or whether we can dot somewhere else and whether these are consistent, the other things, are these consistent with the other goals and policies, either subject to or in process of adopting elsewhere? 7 was too many.
So the number 4, maximize the utility of existing housing stock. To me, I go, increasing the ease of ADUs and people being able to develop ADUs, I see as an extension of that. But what that one worries me about is being able to control what people do with their homes. So maximizing the utility of existing housing stock. I don't think anybody should say, Girdwood Valley Service Area says you need to rent out your house instead of use it part-time a year, for instance. So I don't think that's a right of ours to impose on other private homeowners.
You? Other comments? Thoughts or suggestions?
Go ahead. Okay,
Whoever-
so I was just gonna make a note of the note. It said, note, affordable means housing cost is no more than 30% of gross household income.
Yep.
Which is the national average in 2023 nationwide, but what's interesting here in Girdwood is that we experience some of the highest real estate costs in the state. So to expect it to meet a national average of 30% is, I think that is just a goal that's not going to be met. We just suffer a higher percentage of income towards rental and percentage of income towards housing costs for individuals. Don't want to be set up for failure right out of the chute.
So that's a note as opposed to one of the specific goals, but maybe that's.
Yeah, I mean,
Try and get.
Goal to reduce the overall costs would be laudable.
Right.
But targeting something that we're not even near at this point might be more than a challenge.
I don't actually know if we are near it or not. I think that's in a lot of communities, the housing that's most affordable is housing people already own, have mortgage, either mortgage amounts or mortgage rates based on when they purchased 10 or 15 or 20 years ago.
Right.
So in many ways, fixed rate mortgages are the rent control of the classes.
And it's a challenging number too, because this affects, in lower income brackets, if you study this number, it shows that it's a higher percentage of income anyway towards housing. So it becomes even more of a challenge when trying to define some of these things as, affordable and such. So placing that in our goal might be a challenge.
Matt, are you next?
Yeah, I mean, if you want, I was gonna go a little bit different direction, so if you were following up. on
Yeah, it is a follow-up. Okay, so I would just like in rereading it, it says encourage step-up housing for affordable ownership. So that doesn't mean we have to, it doesn't mean we're obligated, but we should encourage processes that would allow for affordable ownership. And then I do think it makes sense to identify affordable means and that like if we were ever going to be eligible for HUD housing, this is the definition that they're going to be using essentially. So,
Well, can I respond real quickly to that in HUD housing, when they start calculating based on AGI, that AGI that's experienced in the census from Indian South precludes us from a lot of those programs immediately. So in fact, it's much higher than the Anchorage AGI as a whole. We have other increased AGI challenges to meet those entry barriers as well, just FYI.
So I'd love to kind of think about the housing goals in kind of two areas. One is kind of the short-term rental regulation policy. Some of this may address it, but I think the other thing is, I think about just how do we get shit built? And that's not really addressed here, right? Because we have to basically get infrastructure into areas. So we've got land now, right? So then it's like, okay, the dog caught the car now. So I think the goal is one of the goals is to develop a path to get infrastructure into the community to facilitate the workforce, affordable housing, or whatever you want to do. It's an enormous goal, because if we don't get that, the numbers probably won't pencil. So that path to infrastructure, I think is enormous.
So infrastructure, I mean, one way to very.
Water, sewer, yeah, gas, yeah.
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 And what do you say, do you mean like the, push on this because that's interesting, really interesting question. When infrastructure is available next to your lot, the interconnection costs, because they're very high as well.
I think about it this way. If I think about it this way, if I'm a developer serious about wanting to build high density rental units in this town, I knowing that the cost per square foot here is so high, I'd want proof that the community is getting gas put into the locations where you want stuff built, water and sewer put in, utilities, like what steps are you taking to make my life easier to develop at the properties of Lane or in Southtown site or up on Crooked? That's how I think about it. Go ahead, Christina.
So what about the goal that would be support utility expansion to new areas of development identified in plans? Like that way, it's like where we're saying
Right.
this is where we want future development. We're saying we're supporting the infrastructure necessary to take it to there.
Can I add to that a little bit? I see that whole goal of pushing infrastructure into, public disposal of property. Things like building public infrastructure. I mean, take for example, the, just Bolton Hills, the whole idea of opening up parcels of land. But the necessity to do that, one of the big barriers was pushing the infrastructure to it. And, I did pick up one thing out of the slide deck from the assembly stuff, and that was the proposal of making an infrastructure type fund, some type of revolving type infrastructure type fund. And it was always my thought that that's, the job of government to help push that infrastructure that would open up access to those areas that would allow them to dispose of it. And they can make, by rule, they can make those improvements to parcels to then make them more saleable and therefore more available as that can be disposed of. But let's look right out the window of the corner here. The big problem with developing what this public land is, and it came back to it again, is the complaint about the cost of the infrastructure development, the cost of the road, $5 million just to get to the corner, and standards that we have to build to. So that's just, it's instead of our government helping us to open up development, what we get is a barrier that is looking for private investment to do that. And maybe there's a way to take public investment in public infrastructure and focus more on that to open up, let's say, a portion of the road, right? Using some sort of infrastructure development to extend the sewer, to extend the water line, to camp on to projects like the gas line and push it, say, down through Coriolis to get, further road built and things like that that would open up access to. So that's how I see that goal. I see when development is required, use public land to meet public good. I would say development is required and we should use public resources to help promote public infrastructure. And I think pushing that public infrastructure to public land for potential disposal, whether it's given away or whether it's sold, whether it's dedicated to public use or whatever that is, we still need to have infrastructure. That's how I see that goal.
I would add to that too, in relation to gas and AWW, is that those infrastructure bills just don't benefit the housing that will be built. It benefits the entire community. When NSTAR came in and said, "Oh, we want to put a gas line in, we want to run it straight, straight down Rowan into the community," like, okay, clearly they have their need for whatever loop they want to build, right? So then the question is, as Brett mentioned, I think in the first meeting, well, why don't you run it up Corollas and then over? And, I think we need to do things like approach NSTAR and say, listen, like, why don't you consider rerunning the gas line? And you may have an incremental revenue source because we may have construction associated with building that gas line. And yeah, it may cost a little more, but, figure out the MPV if you actually have additional revenue attached to it. So I think we need to kind of convince those that put the infrastructure into this community that there are certain places where it's a benefit to get more of the housing down.
Just on that issue of gas line, do you have, I know in a previous meeting you had some mapping for Girdwood, which shows some of the infrastructure. I believe it showed the water lines in Girdwood. Do you have, do you know where the gas lines currently run? Do you have that?
We don't have that within our GIS stuff. I have it actually in a book in my truck when we do construction, but I don't know where it is over there.
Okay.
But there is, I actually do. It hugs the parcel back down there because it was close to where the Chew Gas secondary line came in underground. So it's within the right of way of the road.
So it actually does go along.
Yeah.
Corridors. Okay, right. But I mean, I was just wondering if we had that information, if that was something we could.
I could look at my book and see what I have, but I don't have a GIS map to it.
In the future, I mean, that might be something that's useful for us as we go forward, just to understand where there is infrastructure and where there isn't. Obviously, we know on the water side, there's city water on the eastern side of Glacier Creek and some up to the school, but nothing on the other side.
To get a comprehensive list, just call locate it in 3 days. You'll have everything up.
Just so I'm intending to build everywhere.
You can just put it right into a map.
I think how we define infrastructure is a very interesting question of where whether it's just basic services or there are some resort communities that actually treated affordable housing, or at least housing which is dedicated through deed to residential use as part of the infrastructure of a community as well. So you can stretch that definition even further into actual housing. I see that Erin has joined us, and I believe Brianna has as well. Do you want to just introduce yourselves? I think we can't hear you, Erin. I don't know if you're speaking.
You might be across the room.
This is Brianna Sullivan, Girdwood Board of Supervisors, co-chair. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Brianna. Okay, Erin, can you just try once more? We're not hearing you. You can see that you're unmuted, but we can't hear you, unfortunately. Okay, we'll leave you to see if we can fix that. Join us conversation when you can. Okay. So I think you're right. I think something around infrastructure probably should be added there as well. Does anyone have any suggestions for some wording we can start with?
One other question about this and whether or not, you, as in particular, whether or not we can wrap this under reducing cost of building. I see that the Assembly has reduced housing cost burdens, but I noticed kind of right away that they didn't seem to be focusing as much as, and you've already caught, like through the gravel, for example, ways to reduce building costs, and I think that running infrastructure also reduces.
I think from a GHG's perspective, our issues are just, I mean, what Anchorage has is great, like, don't get me wrong, but what we need to do to solve a problem is not necessarily aligned with Anchorage. And I think, you know, maybe it fits under some of their policies or principles, but.
Can I?
Yeah.
Can I add a little, maybe a little context to that, as the body progressed, we did, one of the early things was identify what it was that we were trying to solve. And that turned into workforce housing. And we backed out of that, and meaning places for people to have availability to work in the valley and have a place to rent and be able to live here. And that backed out to, well, how do we get there? And and some of the discussion then ventured into, well, let's help reduce the cost of development. And so the immediate problem that we have, that everybody has in developing or choosing to develop and invest their money in the valley, is they're going to pay the premium. They're going to pay the premium to truck everything down here and to truck everything out that they don't want when we do land development. So that's one of sort of the stools, is we have to not only be available by having it in the market, but our initial thought was to help reduce the development of new and available units. So we think that's a big component to make, you know, allowing people to choose to develop here, because that's really where the money comes from to build a house, is somebody's going to choose to invest it here. And when given a choice, you know, spend a 25% premium, it's a, you know, it's a heavy lift. We want to make that an easier lift.
I just want to say a goal. I mean, if we were trying to phrase it into a goal, I just simply say develop an infrastructure plan that facilitates the cost to develop affordable housing, affordable rental units or whatever. And keep it broad, because Arboro, like the small property on Arboro, right, already has pretty much all the infrastructure there. It's like road. You'd argue that, you'd make an argument that the process for getting that smaller parcel developed is significantly different than getting South Townside or Wayne developed. Right, so you could state a broad goal, but, and then Crow Creek Road, right, that's like based on infrastructure, it's probably the last parcel like we'd focus on. It's just gonna take the longest for infrastructure to get to. So, you know, so it's develop an infrastructure plan, but I guess in my own narrow way of focusing it, it's more, if a builder was to come to us and say, this is what it would take to get it done. You need water, you need sewer here, you need utilities, you need whatever, right? And you basically build the plan around what they need.
I would suggest a slight tweak to that. Instead of saying a plan, maybe what we need to do is a short-term identify where the infrastructure is missing, and then move towards finding a way to invest that. So maybe that's this. You know,
Yeah, it's another way of
identifying where it's missing and move towards.
I thought this was at 6.
Finish it at
Second mountain time.
This is a mountain.
Just for the record, Tim Cabana has joined us.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So some things we're discussing are strategies rather than goals in themselves, but it's probably helpful to split those into what's primary. I'm not even sure all of these goals are goals rather than strategies. And then the other thing I think would be useful to do if we can just start discussing how we turn these into things which are, rather than just statements of intent, actually follow the SMART goals principles. So they're specific, they're measurable. We have a timescale associated with them as well. I think that would make it a lot more powerful. But so reviewing, we've got increased proportion of occupied primary residence housing, increased availability of stable rentals, encourage step-up housing for affordable ownership. There is nothing explicitly in here that says workforce housing at the moment. So that's another point I'd make. Maximize utility of existing housing stock. The point of that was building new things is expensive, require infrastructure. Using things that already exist is generally less expensive. So if we're looking for an ROI measure, encouraging the use of existing housing in a way that benefits the community better is cheaper overall than creating new house. When new development is required, that's really just refers back to item 4. So when we want new development, public land should be a public good, and then the organizational capacity. 6 is almost a strategy rather than a goal. I'd be tempted to drop that out and replace it with the identify areas of needed infrastructure and work towards finding investment. Okay. I think so if we drop the original 6, replace it with the infrastructure 1, and make 6 one of the strategies. Anyone would have a stab at when we should be doing this, and either issues of time scale or issues of measurability?
When we should be doing it.
Well, any of them. I mean, if it's a goal, it should have a target date, or at least a target time scale. So are these 20-year goal, a 2-year goal? Should we, when we say increase, I mean, what should we, when have we got enough primary residence housing? Is it, now it's probably 30–40%.
I would say these need to be a minimum of 10-year goals, because it's going to take 5 years to even make major dent, and so I would say 10 years and then to be reassessed, unless it needs to be reassessed sooner than that. But like if you do something for so short, like you're not going to have enough time to implement.
I don't see anywhere up here that encourages, if you want affordable housing, which I'm not sure even is possible. In fact, I don't believe it is, but we'll go down that line. 30% of gross household income is not a number. Okay, that this guy's household income is not the same as this guy, so that's not a number. Affordable housing is such a it's kind of a ghost, right? Because no one knows what it is, and especially in this valley. Okay, and the only way you're going to encourage housing so that people can afford it is you need to look around the valley. You need to look at what people can afford now, and the birdhouse chalets comes to mind. Some of the stuff down in Old Girdwood comes to mind, but a lot of the stuff that you say encourage and maximize and increase, really, all those are, that doesn't. We're not going to accomplish a whole lot, talking about encouraging and maximizing. If we really want to do something, we need to work with the public works, and we need to make the rules for building down here so that you can actually build something without fighting for 2 years to build it, So the birdhouse chalets is a condominiumized piece of property. We should encourage the community to make it easier to condominiumize property down here. And then you've got one driveway and one road going in, you got one water main going in, you got one electric going in, and then you subdivide it into 10, and their cost is down to 1/10 what it's going to cost to do single family homes. So there's something that you can wrap your arms around, and then there's something that you could knock the average price down. But I mean, a lot of the stuff, maximize existing housing stock. You can't tell people what they can do with their houses. And I don't see what you can. I don't even know how. Well, how would you do that? How would you increase the proportion of occupied primary residence housing? Drive a nail under someone's fingernails? I mean, what are you going to do? There's a lot of very affluent people have really nice houses down here, and they're not going to listen to us. We don't have no power to do anything with that.
Yeah, I think the mistake here is thinking the only way you can do this is by mandate and forcing people to do it. And that clearly isn't the case. In a market already encourages certain behavior. And the market somewhat responds and somewhat encourages. So there's all sorts of things you can do. We can go into strategies if you want to, but
It still comes down to supply and demand.
So Tim,
We need to increase the supply.
what you missed, where you came in, we were talking about infrastructure development. And so the question, very simply, is what would it take in terms of infrastructure to get stuff developed to encourage a builder like you to build high density workforce housing? Like, what would it take? No, I mean, that's what we were just talking about. I don't need an answer. But that's, so N-star, AW, whatever it would take, right? In terms of, that's what you missed before you.
So for a guy like me to get involved in something that's not allowed, first of all, it's not even allowed,
But Imagine Girdwood will change that, right? The new zoning from Imagine Girdwood.
I don't see anything in there that allows apartment style, high density.
Rain's gonna go to mixed density, right? So it's
That still doesn't change the code. The code is chapter 9 is the code and it's written in stone. And those people down there that interpret the code do not deviate from the code at all for any reason. And they will tell you that if you want to do this, then you have to go through a 2-year process to get, a check mark put on a box or, a change in the code. You have to rewrite the code for every single thing you want to do. And that's what's discouraging about this. We are not allowed to build anything in this town that we want to build without going through a process that takes years and a lot of energy.
yeah, you want
So I think in reference to Tim's comments, and the taking 2 years to get approval and feeling sympathetic in regards to that issue, I think we're missing the Muni's goal 5, which is make the municipality a better partner in the development process. So I think like that speaks to everything. This is this packet, this is the Assembly's housing action goals. And then I think like number 4 on their goals speaks to a lot of things we've already been doing. So reduce costs, burdens, and ensure safe, affordable, high quality, permanent housing for all residents. That it's like us trying to figure out the gravel situation or figuring out the land situation. Those are things that I think play into that number 4 one. So maybe number 4 is added as a goal. And then underneath of that, like the land item could be like a strategy.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what needs to be done. But now accomplishing that is going to be a tricky part because there's a lack of people down there. They have the same staffing issues that everybody has. And the people that are down there are entrenched down there and do not want to change or do not want to step, no one down there is willing to take a chance at anything. So they're going to go by the book.
So I'm just going to interrupt you to say, Guy, I see Guy is online. Can you just identify yourself, Guy, and say hello?
Yep, Guy Wade, Roads Utility Supervisor.
Thank you. I'm glad the meeting didn't go as long as you feared.
Me too.
I'd just like to respond as well to the comprehensive plan, the new comprehensive plan that's just been submitted to the Muni. When that's adopted, presumably this fall, one of the first actions that happens from that is a rewrite of Chapter 9. So Chapter 9 will get rewritten to be in alignment with what the comprehensive plan says. So yes, there is a process, and it's not going to be instant. It's not going to get rewritten by the end of the year. Even by the end of next year. But during next year, that's when these discussions, exactly how the code is changed and what needs to be changed in it, that's going to be part of our community conversation and a broader conversation. And I would, within probably 18 months, we'll have some draft. So this is not we may have waited 20 years for a change, but we're now kind of towards the action part of that process. So I agree, it's a mess. It's very difficult to follow. It stops us doing a lot of things we want to do and everyone agrees we want to do. And, the Assembly's identified similar problems across the whole of Anchorage. So there's...
Sign me up. I'm all about it. I just don't believe it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, that's definitely some people's opinion of just get rid of everything and just.
Sorry for skepticism, but I've been doing it for 22 years.
Yeah.
And it hasn't worked easy.
The other thing I want to point out is there's something a little way into the package, this diagram, the one with the arch on it, about page 5 or 6 or something, fairly early on. That's for the comprehensive plan. That shows the income distribution according to census numbers for Girdwood. What to me is one of the things that's kind of interesting about this is when you look at most communities across the country, middle income is to a half of the population, and our middle income is about 1/7 of the population. So there's 1/7, 14%. So we have about 2/7 of the population are below 80% of the median, and 3/7 of our population are 120% of them. And we actually have quite a small sliver in the middle, which I think is kind of how, intuitively we think of the community. If there's a lot of people who are in service industries with relatively low income, and there's a lot of people who are very affluent, high income, and there's not that much in the middle. So there's almost like two distributions, as opposed to most communities that's more like a bell curve. So, that's one of the things that causes challenges here. And I suspect that's changed over the last 10 or 20 years, 10, 20, 30 years. And it's more separated than it used to be. But that kind of answers some of the issues, that addresses some of the issues we've had before. Okay.
So, sorry, but before we wander away from goals, I just want to make sure that some of the great work that GHEC has done is reflected in the goals, continue to do it. So for example, the work on the extraction idea and on the RV park, I just want to make sure that they're implied within the goals that we're looking at, because you're specifically mentioned infrastructure. I don't know if gravel falls in that or not, because that tends to me to fall under reducing building costs, kind of just more generally reducing building costs should be a goal, whether or not we can wrap in the infrastructure as part of that. And then also I don't know if the RV park idea falls under step-up housing or where that fits in under these, but it got broad support from LUC, and so I'd like to see that, make sure that we have it within our goals as we move forward on it. It's supported as well as by our goals as it is currently by the community.
So when I'm just keep on going back to these assembly goals. Okay, so increase the supply of housing units for sale and for rent. Like that's an easy one that should be one of our goals as well. Diversify the housing market, housing types, sizes, price points, locations, accessibility, and ownership models. That to me could tie in the RV park because it's a different housing type or and definitely price point. Increase the share of resident occupied housing throughout the year and reduce the number of vacant units. I mean, that's definitely applicable to what we were trying to do in these ones there. Reduce housing cost burdens. That to me is like getting it cheaper to develop here. And then maybe we add in, the code being updated to meet most current planning documents, as maybe part of that. And then make the municipality a better partner in the development process. So like all 5 of those, I actually think you could fit all of these into those 5. And then some of these could become strategies like the land, like incentivizing homeowners to do long-term rental, like that is how I could get to support the maximizing utility of existing housing stock, basically by incentivizing. It would be the way that I would be comfortable with doing that. But anyway, like I kind of look at these 5 and I'm like, they've already approved these ones and we could actually fit all of ours within those as well.
I think whatever we do needs to be should be consistent with those, and probably will be. But I think the point of having good with specific goals is they would be specific to the most pressing issues here, and perhaps a bit more specific, more specific to Girdwood than the general goals of the community as a whole. And I think I agree, there's a lot of stuff in here. So I think the example of gravel is an example that fits absolutely within the infrastructure side as a strategy. I'm not sure where the RV, because the RV park is used as a recreational rather than a residential model. That's kind of, it could be used residentially, but the primary focus for it was recreational. So whether that fits within this or not, it's at least aligned to it.
Mm-hmm.
if it isn't a primary
To
strategy.
add to that use case for the RV accommodations, remember, we have quite a need of folks that are in mobile accommodations that have been interviewed and they are employed and they're working in the valley. And we also have a lot of seasonals that will roll for a period of time in their mobile accommodations. And there's no legitimate place in this valley to park those accommodations. And so this RV camping area idea lends itself to accommodating workers who are in find themselves in these accommodations. And sometimes it's seasonal and other times longer, but I think that is a great resource to have a safe and sanitary and secure area and authorized for those people who are working here. So I would like to discourage the thought that it is strictly a recreational area, although there is a large recreational component to this, which brings a lot of economic activity to the valley and a lot of opportunity for RV campers to spend their money in our restaurants and so on and so forth. So I think it serves quite a wide range of constituents.
Specifically with the RV park, like, I think the goal as of right now is to try to develop that as if Girdwood Park's a recreational asset. But if that does not work, or let's say the feasibility doesn't come out into the way that the service area feels comfortable with, that there would be an opportunity for a private party to move forward and create that RV park. So it would be not Parks and Rec. And so in the way that it's in the comprehensive plan is mixed use, which would allow for either situation to occur. So I would say it steps beyond the parks question. Maybe I'm just gonna make a motion and see what happens. Am I allowed to make a motion, or is it only GBOS?
You can, but we're not, well, you can suggest something, which I think GBOS member can then take up.
Okay, I would suggest that we adopt all 5 of the assembly housing goals, and then we add additional Girdwood ones one by one. So we start with approving the 5.
I'll second that if we need to set it.
I think you need a motion.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second the motion.
For a point of discussion.
Yeah, no, we don't want to discussion.
On item 5, we can't make the municipality kind of anything, but maybe we could focus on what we can do here in Girdwood. And right.
Well, so then we could say encourage the municipality to be a better partner in the development process.
There you go.
Is this the Assembly's own document? So they made a document that said, make ourselves a better partner?
Yeah, they realize.
Well, just to be clear, the Assembly isn't the administration. They're 2 completely different beasts.
Well,
You know, the same as
yes and no. I mean,
Congress isn't president.
Muni, Abel's the Muni. All these people have to work together in order to make this.
They have different perspectives.
Yeah.
One tax dollars putting that sentence on.
I would say the planning department and the nation's assembly are not eye to eye on several things right now.
Planning department enforces for, a document. They don't get to make up their own rules, and a bureaucrat is only in trouble when he says yes.
That's the problem.
Well, but it's
In a nutshell.
it is a fact.
So
Well, how many years in that
That's why nothing
process?
gets done.
So you have to climb the ladder far enough, whether it's through, going to the director of a department or going through the planning and zoning, commission, submitting, an actual, adjustment to the plan, they can be adopted, just like, what's going on at LAX Resort right now. It's gone on, at least its 3rd or 4th, master planning process. That's the way the process is set up, but it's not cheap, and it's not fast. But you can, get it approved,
Yeah. If you live long enough.
So just to
There's a process.
keep this focused, not the word focus, that's a good point. So you're right, there's a difference between the implementation of what the rules are and setting the policies which then result in the rules. And we as a community have just gone through the exercise of redoing our comprehensive plan, which is setting the policies. And now what we have to follow on from that, when it's adopted later this year, is then to go through to the implementation phase and then, effectively be part of the drafting of the replacement to Chapter 9, which will be the implementation of one of those policies. And then planning's job is to follow that document and do what they, follow those guidelines. So that's how one of the ways in which we solve this problem. And you're right, it's a very slow process.
Well, it's probably, if you can come up with, a plan you want to implement, you'll probably get there faster using the current system, trying to change the system.
Except we already are in process.
Well, I
to
mean,
change
at
the
least,
system. Yeah.
because you can't develop on the basis of the comp plan.
No,
You
you've got
get
to
developed on the basis of
Yeah.
of the zoning plan. So by the time you get around to getting the money, getting, the emphasis from the assembly and all that sort of thing, I mean, you would be more, you would spend your money better to go through the existing system and use the existing system, to get the development that you want.
I'm not going to go too far into the weeds there. The only complexity is a lot of the existing system says you have to follow the comprehensive plan. So once it's adopted, we then have this mismatch between the two. But yeah, so fixing Chapter 9 is absolutely one of the strategies, or changing Chapter 9 is one of the strategies that comes out of this. But just, sorry. Go ahead.
I have a high level sort of point in here that one of the goals that we're missing is any consideration for the existing town and culture that we enjoy. So all of these have impacts, and what I've noted in our discussion, and I have experience with the development department as well, and having to subdivide, and I'm quite familiar with the cost to do all of this in the process. But what's distinct is our Title 21, Chapter 9 design considerations, which were adopted to emphasize the culture and the environment that people wanted with Girdwood. So it has a specific look for commercial places or signs or what have you. And all of those rules are something that the development department and planning and zoning, all of them have to abide by those rules. But the problem that we've had in development has been within the process of building safety, development services and such, because they're just following the rules of Title 21, Chapter 9. But what's really interesting here is that all of these things are happening. What's happening, let's say, as a contrast, there's a lot of bigger lots being carved into a lot of smaller lots. So what that does is it changes what would have been intended, right? And changes the density and the feel of a neighborhood, for instance. And so it has impact. And some of those being, in fact, a lot of them being rented out as short-term rentals. So the impacts then are compounded and compounded. So when we talk about this, should we have a goal that talks about, or do we care to talk about maintaining any standards or look, feel, or intention of the design standards from Title 21, Chapter 9? Because the whole document here from the assembly throws a lot of that out the window, and it does things like take commercial space and just put residents in it. So if we have a vibrant commercial area with, say, a bar or, activity going on, and you put residences in there as a mixed use, which some cases it might be appropriate, some cases it might cause some conflict in the densities we're talking about. So the point is that we look at the impacts of doing all of these things without consideration to why we're under Title 21, Chapter 9, so that we can at least evaluate, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, in order to meet a mixed density goal. So just for discussion purposes, really.
Well, these 5 goals, I mean, we could just stop with number 1, okay? The other five are just people wanting to listen to themselves thinking they're doing something. Number 4, reduce housing cost burdens, ensure safe, affordable, high quality, permanent housing for all residents. You might as well just go behind a tree and look for a unicorn, I mean, what does that statement mean? It doesn't mean anything. You can't have affordable, high quality, permanent housing for all residents, okay? That ain't never gonna happen, not in this valley. It's just not. So what you need to do is number 1, increase the supply of the housing units for sale and rent. That's what we need to, I'm sorry, but that's what we need to really focus on. These other things are just people writing things down that don't even make any sense to make them feel good, but they're not real, you know? Make the municipality a better partner in the development process. Why didn't they do that themselves 20 years ago? You know, I mean, they could do that themselves tomorrow by taking chapter 9 and making it workable. It's theirs, but they aren't interested in doing it.
So what we have on the table is a motion to adopt the.
I thought we couldn't have a motion.
There was a motion, yes, from
I
Jennifer.
thought it was a suggestion.
Seconded from.
There was a suggestion and there was a motion, I think, in a second.
Yeah, there is a motion and a second. So that what we have on the table now is to adopt, instead of adopting our own, just to adopt the goals from the Assembly Housing Action Plan.
As a
And then-
start, and we can add our own Girdwood ones subsequently, maybe one by one, but I would say like, start here. I would offer that we amend, what?
Go ahead.
Sorry. That we, instead of, so it says for all residents, I agree that that's overly ambitious. I think we should end the sentence at permanent housing. So reduce housing cost burdens and ensure safe, affordable, quality, permanent housing. That's what we should do. We can't solve everybody's problem everywhere. And then change number 5 to say encourage the municipality. So those would be the 2 amendments that I would suggest within those 5 goals as a start.
I'll go along with this and vote for anything you guys want.
Can you-
A lot of stuff.
You wait to be recognized, please,
That's not possible.
Tim. So I'd like to address, do you want to do a formal chair? First, can I comment?
Oh, yes, I will chair so you can recognize Mike.
Thank you. I like I understand where this is coming from, and I don't think it's necessarily wrong. I think whatever we do, we should relate what we have directly to both the Anchorage goal, the Anchorage wide goals, the assembly goals, and to the comprehensive plan goals. What I don't think is we should just take the assembly goals directly and work from them. I think we need to work from our own goals and from things which are specific to Girdwood, and then talk about how it fits into the bigger picture, not just treat Girdwood as part of the Anchorage-wide problems, because we have a lot of problems which are specific to here and a much different scale. So I would approach it from a different point of view, but I think you're right in we need to show the alignment. I think that's absolutely correct. So a lot of your comments I agree with, just I do it from a slightly different position of starting off with a good but specific thing and then talking about how it relates to the municipal-wide goals. So the language would be very similar. It would just come from a slightly different perspective.
Could we take number 6 from strategies and stick it on that list of 5? Because that's really, really the most important one. Streamline municipal processes. That's what holds us up.
For new housing or for use of existing housing. So for example, one of the things we're looking at is short-term rentals. So how does short-term rentals relate to streamlining municipal processes?
If you streamline the process, you will end up with more building going on out here. Because a lot of people get discouraged and leave. I mean, it's very discouraging trying to build here. It's like a fight from day one forever. You just went through it. I mean, isn't it discouraging? It's very discouraging, and this is something that they have control over, this is the problem with community. You go down there and you meet with them and then they figure out how to tell you why you can't do what you want to do. Instead of getting together and saying, well, let's figure out how we can do this. They tell you why you can't do it. They don't even try to make any project work. They just come up with a list of things why you can't do it. And so it's really as simple as an attitude, the attitude down there is this is why you can't do it, instead of let's try to make this work. And when Berkowitz was in office, I went in and met with him and I told him exactly that. I go, you need to go down there and meet with those people and you need to tell them that what we want to do is try to make these things work instead of not trying to make them work. And he agreed with me, and he's no longer around, but still, nothing really changes, So streamlining the process so that you can go down there and not take 2 years, or like the resort took 10 years to get permitted. 10 years.
No, it didn't.
Was it 11?
Oh. I worked on that project from beginning to open in 9 years. I mean, from when we.
9 years, okay.
No,
That's right.
purchasing the land, proposed purchasing the land to open.
You're talking, sorry, are
About 4 years of that was construction.
you talking about the hotel itself? Like?
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
yeah.
But that would be before Title 21.
No, it wasn't before Title 21.
I thought the hotel was pre
It was
2000.
before Chapter 9.
Chapter 9, yes, but
Yeah,
it's
that's right.
required a conditional
Yeah,
use.
okay,
That
that's the-
whole
that's the
process
previous-
hasn't been much different.
It was under the previous Title 21, not the new one. Yeah,
But the conditional use process is then and now.
yeah, it's the same.
Fundamentally the same.
Yeah, agreed.
Because if it isn't outright permitted, then it's a conditional use.
Yeah. It was what's permitted has changed, but yeah, the conditional use process is the same.
Speaking
Okay.
of streamlining processes, if I may,
So
sorry, I would agree with Crystal, and I don't agree that these are, like somehow or another Anchorage specific. They're very well scrubbed already. I think we could just tweak them a little bit. And Tim, I like your idea about putting the strategy 6 into goal number 5.
Yeah.
And so I would amend and I also I'm not super crazy about 4 at all. So I would amend what I proposed earlier, depending on the second. And I would say for goal number 1, I would put increase the supply of safe, affordable, high quality housing units for sale and rent, incorporating that phrase from goal number 4. Goal number 4 would now read simply reduce housing cost burdens. And goal number 5 would be streamline municipal processes.
That's good change. Like that.
I think I followed that. If the motion would like the second to be amended. I feel like, for discussion, I'm also happy to second the amended motion.
can you just go through that again, please, Jen?
Sure.
And Brianna, just
So
number 1 would become.
I'm sorry.
One.
Just to go through the goals on the front page. So number 1.
Repeat what you
Repeat what I said, okay.
Yep.
So goal number 1 is now increase the supply of safe, affordable, high quality housing units for sale and for rent. Goal 2 is the same. Goal 3 is the same. Goal 4 is simply reduce housing cost burdens, or we could change that to reduce cost of building, okay, I don't care, whatever. And then goal number 5, streamline municipal processes.
Okay. So 4 is reduce housing cost burdens alone.
Correct, because I would agree with Tim that the addition of that remainder, actually it doesn't even fit with the first part of the sentence. I think it fits better up with goal number 1, but also it is a little bit of unicorn. So.
Right. And 5 is streamline municipal processes.
Correct.
By itself.
Right.
That's just a friendly amendment to number 5.
Sure.
Which would be streamline municipal processes to achieve the comprehensive plan goals, or good comprehensive plan goals, or something like that.
That's lovely. Let's do that. I mean, with the approval in a second.
I agree. I second that amendment.
Have a hand up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Jen, on number 4, that reduce housing cost burdens, you referring to, I know there's talk about gravel and could you just give me an example of that, please?
Sure. I'm sorry, I think you missed the earlier part of the conversation, but we were talking about not only gravel, but encouraging, for example, creative ways to think about getting infrastructure into some of the lots where we're hoping to have development happen. So it incorporates both gravel and infrastructure, any other way that we can reduce building costs. I want to keep it open enough that it falls within that goal.
Like sewer and water and that kind of stuff, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's quite a cost. They try to put sewer and water down in my place every 8 or 10 years, and it's incredible how much it costs. So, okay, thanks for that clarification.
So Crystal,
I like all of those suggested amendments, and would support them. And then I would maybe question, reduce housing cost, or sorry, reduce housing development cost burdens would maybe be like the one word I would add in. Development.
That would make
Like
sense.
that's
That would help.
Yeah, development.
Reduce housing development cost burdens, and because then that could also include infrastructure, I think.
Okay. I mean,
Yeah,
I agree with that suggested verbiage. Description.
Brianna?
Thank you, Mike, and I like all the comparisons with the strategies and goals, and I agree with comments from way earlier with the sets of goals and how they really could overlap. People could just add in a way, but if we got into strategies of one of the goals, like 5 could have an A or a B under about being a good partner, if that's something we already feel like we're doing as different bodies in Girdwood, and having goals toward the common good, but then it could just be part of a strategy if we just clearly have the goals without making them too descriptive. But I like that some words can help them be more specific.
Matt and Brett.
I say, whatever you guys write, I don't say I've tuned it out, but I almost have. Whatever we write's fine. The goal is, how do I get something built on Arbor? If I get something built on Relane, I get something built on in South Townsend. That's my goal. Like, when I think about what I want to accomplish, it's not item 3 on policies. So, and so that's, so I think that, if you want to present this to the community is, GHC has worked its ass off to make sure that the HLB plan has certain parcels that we want to identify for workforce housing. Right? And then the goal would be to get workforce housing on the parcels that we just, had meetings and discussed with assembly members and stuff. That's the goal. The goal of this is like noise. So that's, sorry if, and again, however you vote, I'll vote fine. I don't have an issue with the policies, but those aren't the goals. To me, the building is the goals. So.
Brett was.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Next to you, then,
Um,
and then Kristen.
yeah, again, I'm gonna try to circle back to, I think that one of our goals, because it's a salient characteristic of Girdwood, is that we maintain some semblance of what is Girdwood. And so I just would be hesitant of losing that in these laudable goals if we didn't at least mention that we should keep it, an eye towards Girdwood is a mountain town. And I'll offer an example with, say, trails. We have a very focused effort on trail development, which is a huge draw for our valley as far as economic activity and development and such. And even sometimes those activities draw others in, like seasonal workers from the Forest Service that need places to live as well. So this blends in the whole thing. I don't want to lose Girdwood when we strive for increasing the supply of housing units for sale and rent. And when we should state, in my opinion, something that says we want to maintain somewhat of our downtown culture. That's by maintaining Title 21, Chapter 9 design standards. That's one way. If we can reiterate it in another way with our goals, that might be good to keep us on track. So I would offer maybe a number 7 that we, as an amendment, that we also strive to maintain that which makes Girdwood a special place. And that is, we should have an eye towards that when we're developing policies and developing goals. And it can be general. And I think that just putting it out there again is something to consider, might remind us. So I would like to offer that if there was a second.
I was gonna, sorry, can I just, there's something I want to respond to that, but
Yeah.
Kristen was next.
So
Unless somebody wants to make the amendment in response to
Yeah.
Brett's suggestion.
I definitely think that we need to add additional goals apart from these 5. But these are where we start as our baseline, and then we add in an additional one, which could come immediately following this vote, because technically we're still in discussion of a motion. So I would say, like, let's get that clear, get it, and then from there we can add additional ones on top of these 5. And then really, I don't think it's that realistic to be able to go through strategies in this meeting. I think that we agree on goals, and then maybe each of us come back with our list of strategies and which goal they think it falls under. And then we can go over those in another meeting where we're suggesting specific strategies under each of the goals, which we have already agreed upon.
Isn't what he's talking about also in the first paragraph of the old gap, and it's also in
It's in
the
the,
first paragraph of the
Yeah.
green written.
so
Okay.
my comment was going to.
Well, I mean, it is in there. I mean, if you, yeah.
So I take your point. I don't know in terms of, we'll
It's not-
discuss in a second, in terms of a
It's in
strategy, what happens next.
comprehensive.
So in the suggestion, in the page on the starting point for suggestions here, we had a vision statement as well. That probably is the right place, what you're saying, because that sits above the goals. That's kind of that's where we end up. So that's on I think this vision was Girdwood has good quality, stable, affordable housing for residents across the community, income distribution, provision of such housing as community infrastructure. We could take out that second phrase and just say, respecting the
Community.
respecting the character,
Character of the
the
community.
character of the community as a mountain resort town. But suggest that change, and that's overriding all the goals. I'm going to suggest, since we have 2 items to cover and we've spent just over an hour on this one, I would suggest that perhaps we should move to if we're going to do a vote on this, perhaps we should move to a vote soon. If anyone wants to.
I'll call the question and there's no other discussion on the motion.
So what I think I have, if I recorded this correctly, we're going to keep. I don't know if anyone wants to make a motion to update the vision statement. We can do that as an amendment, I suppose. But perhaps we want to make an amendment to update the vision statement to include a comment about the community character.
I put as the seconder. Second. Or
Well, somebody needs to move first.
Do you think that we could do the goals and then go and
Yeah, we could.
handle
Yep.
because I think we're getting a little confused on.
If we do them both together, then they're consistent. We can do these separately. So we have 5 goals. So based on the Assembly Housing Action Plan, the first goal is increase the supply of safe, affordable, high quality housing units for sale and rent. That's good. 2 is the same, diverse housing market, housing type, size, price points, locations, accessibility, and ownership models. 3 is increase the share of resident occupied housing throughout the year, reduce number of vacant units. 4 is reduce housing cost burdens. And 5, streamline the municipal process to achieve the goals of the new Girdwood Comprehensive Plan.
Housing development costs?
Sorry, housing development costs was something else. That was definitely a point. Actually, personally, do not agree with that. I think it's broader than that. So maybe I will offer an amendment to not have development housing, not have the word development in number 4, because I think it's broader than just creating new housing. It's existing housing as well. But I'm not going to make a motion. I'd politely ask somebody to do so if they wish. If not, we'll keep it as is. I'm not hearing that amendment. So number 4 was. Sorry, Guy?
I guess I'm kind of losing where we're at. I do like the reduced housing development cost. I like that.
Okay, in that case, don't move my suggested amendment then.
Okay.
So we have the word reduce housing development cost burdens as item 4. I think we're ready for a vote.
Item 5.
Do it by roll call? Sure. Guy Wade,
Yes.
Brian Burnett,
Yes.
Mike Edgington,
Yes.
Jennifer Wingard,
Yes.
and Brianna Sullivan.
Yes.
So that passes 5 in favor, 0 opposed.
Okay. I'd entertain a motion to update the vision statement to include, to strike the second sentence and include the language we earlier suggested, which was something that in the lines of I can't remember.
Preserving the character or something. But Jennifer, you could fill it in.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what you said was something like, Girdwood has quality, stable, affordable housing for residents across the community's income
Maintain.
distribution. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Okay.
the word maintaining rather than preserving, I think it was like suggested. But it was like maintaining the characteristics of,
After income distribution would be maintaining the
yeah,
character.
while maintaining the characteristics
While
of
maintaining.
it as an outdoor recreation resort community.
So moved.
You have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? If not, we'll move to a vote. Do a roll call, please.
Yes, I'm still writing them. Sorry. All right. Guy Wade,
Yes.
thank you. Brian Burnett,
Yes.
Mike Edgington,
Yes.
Jennifer Wingard,
Yes.
and Brianna Sullivan.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent. So we now have a set of goals and a vision statement. And we can do the next step, which is filling in strategies and making this a bit more complete with the comprehensive plan. Okay, I think that's item number 1 dealt with. So let's move on to, thank you everyone. So let's move on to item number 2, discuss Girdwood-based short-term regulation potentials, and within that,
Can we,
sorry.
can we go back for? So I was hoping we might talk a little bit more about if we do want to specifically add any more goals. So I would say that the land item, I think, either needs to be identified which one we're going to put it under, or adding number 6 for Girdwood to have site control over land for housing purposes. That's definitely something the GHAC has been working on, and to like specify either which goal it's going to fall under or adding it as an additional one.
So I'm going to suggest that we don't do that under today's meeting, that we have the goals we've adopted are fairly broad. So we can add specific strategies such as land control aligned with those goals.
Okay,
so you do that as a second phase. I think what we've done now is made a statement of what our core goals are, and then we can define other things in terms of those.
Okay, so which goal in particular do you see that one falling under, so I can make my suggestions next time?
It actually falls under 7 because it's an approach which addresses increasing
Diversification.
Yeah, potentially diversification, potentially increasing the share of, and potentially reducing cost burden. So it's a strategy, it's a general strategy which achieves several things which companies can.
Okay, fall under multiple goals.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
You can achieve multiple goals.
Actually, can we talk about that a little bit? Because I'm not so sure. I agree, and I think just because it's been such a sticking point for so long with HLB, right? That there might be a point to have it in our goals, especially if we're referring to that and as we deal with the assembly and as we deal with HLB and everything else. There might be. I know we need to move on, but I think that there really might be a point to putting this in within our goals. This business of local land management is unique, probably the most unique thing about our Girdwood housing situation from the assemblies. Sorry, what's within the Anchorage. Goal. So I guess I'll put it this way. I could make a motion and if nobody seconds it, then we can move on. So I'll make a motion that we do add a sixth goal specifically dealing with our land control. Is that what you were suggesting, Crystal?
Yeah,
Here a second?
I'll second it.
I think it's just a GBOS.
It has to be GBOS.
Somebody second.
I will second it.
Thank you, Brian. So anyone want to speak to this?
Recognize?
Yeah.
I just, like you just said, like this has been such a long process that unless we're like super clear about what we're wanting, like I think that it could get lost in the strategies. And I do think it would better serve us if it was identified as a goal, because it also would be it would be easy to quantify if we achieve that goal, right? Like if we get a parcel transferred over, it would have been accomplished. And a lot of these things will not be so identifiable in how successful we are or not. And this one would be very clear. So like, I know that we have a need for land for multiple reasons, but certainly housing. And this would separate us out from the muni, showing them specifically what they can do. Like, yes, we agree with all of your goals in addition to this. So that would be, I mean, and I'm not even suggesting we're putting it towards nonprofit. I'm just saying Girdwood in general.
I agree with that.
Any other comments?
I think you need to better define the land. Because you could say that, control all land. You aren't specific about what parcels with what properties.
So
I see specific language.
I mean, I would say,
In the motion, it did not specify.
Right.
What?
so GHC has gone extensively over the parcels and we have agreed and written a resolution. So I would say each one of those parcels should and could be included in that. So it's very clear, like we're not asking for all the land because that will definitely get a lot of pushback. But if we say like, we've identified these parcels and they're in the HLB plan and this is path we see moving forward. I'm very supportive of identifying which parcels.
Clear.
I'd like to. Yeah.
Basically say as parcels identified in the HLB 5-year plan and 6134 or whatever it wasn't.
Can we just, might I suggest that we make it generic and rather than specific and say, streamline municipal process and then pursue lands in the valley that work towards these prescribed goals. And all of the parcels that we're doing, I can see fitting into the goals that we've kind of outlined. So if we kept it generic, that would let us say next year, if there was a different parcel, we wouldn't have to change all of this. We could just stick to the overall goal of pursuing in accordance with these goal sets. We should be pursuing parcels that we've identified in the valley to be used for purposes to attain the goals. And just keep it generic. Would that be acceptable?
I guess as long as it's not so generic, if I may, as long as it's not so generic that you would say that the lands and specifically are under, proposed lease that are HLD lands as well, that the community continue to have control of those. So that's all I'm saying. You need to be specific enough about what parcels you want control of to not end up being misconstrued.
Would that be our strategy play? I think that we could describe that as strategy towards the goals. Perhaps as we discuss our strategy, would that be something acceptable to attain these goals? We would pursue a strategy of completing on the requested parcels for development of XYZ, PDQ, and lay it out that way within strategy, which can always change to meet the goals.
Mike, you're
So, yeah,
recognized.
thanks. So I think actually the last couple of points bring up exactly what my concern is about this. We've gone from something that was a bit more specific, the original proposal, into these sets of more general goals. And now we're talking about a very hyper-specific additional goal, which doesn't really match the other 5 at all. What we're talking about is strategies. And I think that falls under the strategy section of specific actions we're intending to take. We can write resolutions and do whatever else we need to do around those. But there's a set of specific actions we intend to take following from these goals. But what we're talking about in terms of land ownership, it isn't the means to an end, or it isn't the end itself. It's only a means to an end, and the means that the ends are these other goals. So I think what we're discussing here falls absolutely under strategy. Acquiring the land isn't a solution. Even acquiring the land and putting one type of housing in there hasn't solved our problem. It's moving towards addressing these goals. It's not an end in and of itself. So I would disagree with adding that as an additional goal. It's part of a strategy rather than a goal itself.
I don't have my hand up, but Mike, you can have the chair back.
Jennifer.
Well, I have a suggestion about that might wrap that idea in, which is and to Mike and Crystal both, what if we said something like for number 6, increase local control and management of publicly held lands?
I'm very supportive of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the strategies, could I go into further detail, but that's the broad, and these are all broad.
And that would address our long-standing and very specific issue in terms of the differentiates us from general municipal situations. Good. So good. Okay, so that's our new motion. Increase local control and management of publicly held lands for goal number 6.
And by local, you mean Girdwood? I mean, we need to be specific.
That Girdwood.
Yeah.
Control.
So.
I have a question for the discussion, Mike.
Yeah, please go.
I guess my hesitancy with that is just everyone probably would have their own answer, but who would be in control in Girdwood? Like the municipality, if they saw this, would say, oh, well then who's getting paid to do that? Or request for proposal, or I don't know what it means. That's just my hesitancy.
My comment would be that's in the strategy, but that's what we've been articulating to the assembly members already as we've been going after the wetlands. Nothing we haven't said, people haven't said to the meetings. So.
You go next.
Well, I would say, I obviously was working on the community land trust being able to acquire land for local control. That was prior to Prop 7 passing. So like before then, it was the only pathway forward. Now there's two pathways. And I am also equally in support of Girdwood Valley Service Area taking ownership through withdrawal. Because my primary is that Girdwood is the one to control it. So whether it happens through a nonprofit avenue or it happens through GVSA, I am supportive of either direction. But I do think that it will be easier to obtain Girdwood Valley Service Area especially through the withdrawal process. But I think it could. Yeah, anyway, so to answer your question, I'm supportive of both, but GVSA I see as the easier pathway forward.
Mike, you're recognized.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the addition of making that part of goal 5. I still think it falls outside the range of these goals and feels clearly into the strategy of how we achieve these. It isn't an end in itself. It's a way to achieve the other ends. So I will be voting against this. Did anyone else want to comment? No, let's move on to a vote.
Okay.
So this is, just to clarify, this is an amendment, or this is a change to goal 5 to add in the language which I've forgotten and you wrote down.
Sorry,
I
thought it was.
think what I heard was
Sorry,
the motion first.
Okay, misunderstood it. So
So, yeah, I think restating the motion is a good idea. What I have written is adding a 6th goal that says to increase Girdwood local control and management of public land.
Thank you, everyone, for the discussion too. And I feel like I'm not attached to having goals that we can't achieve, but I see this as a strategy and I could see it as adding a goal, fine, let's just keep making common steps forward and then move on to the next item on our agenda. So I'm conflicted on this one because I see it as a strategy too, but not attached.
I think we're ready to move on to a roll call vote.
Okay. Knowing that some people are still thinking, I'm gonna start with Guy Wade,
Yes.
Jennifer Wingard,
Yes.
Brian Burnett,
Yes.
Mike Edgington,
No.
Brianna Sullivan.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-1.
Okay. Oh, is everyone comfortable with moving on to item number 2? So we've eaten quite a long way into item number 2. But we could extend the meeting. I think we really intend to finish this at 6. Okay, item number 2 is discuss Girdwood-based short-term regulation potential, and subtopic is discuss EU regulation proposed by GHEC. It falls under STR regulations. So again, context, the Assembly failed to pass any short-term rental regulation. We, GBOS, back in December, passed a resolution identifying 4 aspects or 4 themes that 4 goals basically that short-term rental regulation should achieve within Girdwood. The proposal from the Assembly for adding a registration process, I think, only achieves some of those. But nonetheless, even though it didn't pass municipal-wide, it is potentially a framework we could start with, adopt, and would solve some of the issues that we wanted to address. So I guess the kind of big question here is, what's the best strategy for us going forwards? Are there any details? Do we want to set a process? Do we want to set a time scale? What should we be doing next? So I'll throw it out to the body to discuss this. I think the packet contains our resolutions, both our resolution on the 4 goals, a resolution specifically on AO 2023-110S, the text of the Assembly's proposal for adding the registration process, and then there's another document at the end discussing 2 documents at the end, one discussing a proposal, a detailed proposal, how we can do it, and a draft. Yes, sorry, the very last thing, this is a slightly different issue. This is a resolution which comes, the last page is a resolution which comes from the Budget Advisory Commission, which addresses one of the things, partly addresses one of the things we identified, GBOS identified as our goals, which is provide some funding from short-term rental taxes to mitigation of housing impacts. So that's kind of an aside. I don't actually know if this draft was passed around to the members of the Budget Advisory Commission who are going to vote by email. I don't know what the status of it is at the moment as to whether it was adopted or not. I will find out. So that's the material in the packet. We're open to the body. Yes, Brett.
Right, so from last GHEC meeting, I think we had a quick discussion on this, and some of the, say, important topics that might have come up would be, at least my takeaways were a desire to keep the registration fee down, to encourage everybody to register, and then to make the, let's say, penalty for not registering higher. And like the proposed one that came out of the Assembly was just the opposite of that, $400 registration fee, $300 fine. So I know that our topics that we're talking about just sort of wanted to encourage everybody who was doing STRs to, freely register, that type of thing.
Make it free.
Well, there you go. And,
Get more people to do it.
The one thing that we did discuss, though, was the cost burden of managing a program such as that has some, PCE associated or costs for an employee, maybe part-time. But nonetheless, we had talked about that in addition to other service area requirements for programs, things that may come up in the future. But this should at least pay for that, have the STRs pay for that. The other thought was that to meet the goal of mitigating impacts to the neighbors, the thought also came up that, let's say there were too many complaints, say this part-time, person tracking this, and might have to have a report of, how many times code compliance has come out to abate a complaint, and then give that report. And we might want to understand a fee schedule that says your permit costs a lot more if you have all of these complaints. And perhaps that then becomes a very, a higher permit fee in order to abate the costs of somebody dealing with that particular property. So those were a couple of the items that came up. The other thing was that it should be as simple as possible, that things should not, this was a lot of complexity and a lot of language. Really, our goals are quite simple. We stated them in a few bullet points. I think that the simpler it is, then the sort of the easier it will be to get our heads around this type of regulation and how that might look. The last thing I'll offer is that I did talk to planning department about use of Title 21, Chapter 9, to meet some of these goals at implementing short-term rental type regulations. It seems to be that that would be a great mechanism when for like a one-time touch on and understanding the land use going on for a particular property, but it doesn't lend itself to recurring registrations and ongoing, let's say, annual maintenance and so on and so forth. So that's going to be something that's particular to our service area, and it may be governed. I'm not sure if we can do a service area governance under Title 10 to give that authority delegated to the service area, but that's the type of regulatory mechanism that's going to be required in order for a Girdwood service area to run its own STR regulation. I know that there's good support for that from the original, proposers of this type of regulation, and a recognized need for Girdwood to have an idea of what's going on with this activity. And then to, of course, meet the goals that were stipulated here at the end of last year from GBOS. So with that info.
Thank you, Brett. I tried to follow a lot of that, and I was stuck on one thing that I've not read that in a while, but weren't the fines able to be recurring for that? Let's say it was $300 fine. Couldn't they have that multiple times?
Yep.
So it may not be just a one-time fee for that. Right. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. One time I read that through, I thought, well, that could be pretty expensive for someone, but a ding the first time and the other times. But I like your suggestions and what GHEC spoke about and come to the conclusions of.
But
Matt was supposed to.
I guess I just broadly, I think about it in three buckets, so they tend to shift. One is that we all recognize that short-term rentals are a benefit to the community, so, and you try to keep a free market. But then there's the issue of, so that's one thing I think about is trying to let the market kind of sort itself out. Then the other thing I sorted out was like, well, how do we really disincentivize bad behavior and punish people accordingly? Right. So I think about it that way. And then at the same time, I'm thinking, well, in the context of those two things, is there a way to encourage people to shift based on their behavior more from short-term rentals to long-term rentals, keeping the first two principles. And so, that's just broadly how I think, but I agree the regulation should be simple, but I hope they would accomplish some combination of all those three things, even if I wouldn't get everything. Crystal?
Oh, I just want to speak to, I believe like simplicity is key into getting something passed. So like the basic framework of a registration process, like step one, this is how I see it working. Like, if it is gonna go through, then I see that as like where you start. And in my opinion, the fees should be like a $300 registration fee and a $600 fee if you don't register. And maybe even like a $50 per night that you're renting on top of that $600. It is, you know, you need to register. We also need to spend some money on communicating the fact that they do need to register, right? But then I think that it should be fines for if your property is becoming a nuisance. So I would say the first time, I would say can have a warning. Second one, $500. You know, third one, $750. Fourth one, $1,000. If you get to number 5, you no longer get a short-term rent for 12 months. You know, like, or even 2 years, you know, like make it so that they have many warnings. Cause honestly, like, let's say somebody gets a warning and now they have to pay a $500 fine, like they can now they can put their notes, you know, for the renter, like, just so you know, if you get called in to be a nuisance, like, we're gonna charge you, the guest, $500, you know, so like the host could start to implement these things as if they were to be fined, right? So, and then of course, knowing that there is a chance that you can have your right removed if you continue to be a problem for your neighbors. So that would be the type of registration. And so basically at $300, a registration fee, with 350 rentals in the valley, it's $105,000. And I absolutely think we could get a contractor to work for less than that amount, who would manage the list of rentals and the appropriate host contact information so that the police has access to that list and can call whoever is listed on the host. And that's basically the responsibility of the contractor, is to collect the fees, hand them over to Girdwood Valley Service Area quarterly or monthly or whatever, and then keep a list that their responsibility is to provide to the police department. So that would be a basic framework of something that I would support.
But my only thought on this is, A, is it legal? B, who collects the money? Where does the money go? You know, what entity gets the money? C, do you actually have any authority to, does anybody have any authority to fine anybody and collect a fine? But if they say, no, I'm not paying, you know, I mean, I'm all for what you're saying, but make sure that you don't try to make a regulation that's unenforceable and illegal.
So obviously lots of municipalities and towns, and cities and stuff have short-term rental regulation. It is very true that some of those municipalities and cities have been sued for that. So like that is a factor. It does seem to be that regulation eventually wins out, you know, when they scale it to what's necessary. And I think they're only really getting sued when they say they ban it or they prevent somebody from doing it entirely. Like that's when people get sued. So, but if we say, like, if you want to participate in this market, you are required to register and pay a permit fee. It's just like a business license, you know, it's part of the cost of doing business. As long as you don't make it so insane that people are like, I'm not going to pay that, you know.
So who would you write the check to?
Well, I think like if there was first of all, it would need to be a Chapter 9 amendment, in my opinion. So like short-term rental regulation specific to Chapter 9, and then all of those fees would be lined out. And then I would think that we should be able to do a contractor that would be specified in that. So you would pay and that the contractor would transfer the money to Girdwood Valley Service Area.
Again, who would you write the check to?
So it depends on which contractor Girdwood Valley Service Area approves, such as the way that they contract with the fire department. They're a third-party entity contractor.
Okay, now
Actually, I can add some. There's another way of doing this, which is the municipality itself is the body.
the municipality, you have to write the check.
So now the check is written to the municipality, whether it's a municipal employee who does the management of this or whether it's contracted out to a third party is kind of where that comes in. But that's where the fees will go. And the advantage of a registration process, either as a business license or something else, but probably as a business license.
There must have been.
Sorry, if you let me finish.
The assembly did pass this.
No,
it was.
They didn't. Well, they passed it and then they were good. They took it away.
There must have been a legal way for the assembly to pass it.
Correct.
And the fee must have had to go to somebody. So we have to find out who that was.
Who's
So the
clerk?
questions you asked about whether it's legal, yes, it is. I mean, it appeared to be because it went through review before it came out. This was about to be withdrawn, actually. It was, although it was passed by the Assembly, it was about to be unpassed by a reconsideration motion. So the mayor did veto it, but it would have failed anyway. So we have basically a proposal of implementing a registration process through Chapter 10 that the Assembly has already done some work on, got to a point where it got barely enough votes to pass and maybe would have failed afterwards, but that was across the municipality as a whole. I think there is a question of whether there's some technical aspect about how it could apply just to Girdwood and not the whole municipality. And there's a couple of ideas floating around about how to do that. I don't think that is the problem. I think the problem is whether this does what we want. The registration process by itself gives you numbers and it gives you a signed document that each host has to sign to say, I will abide by these rules, which they currently don't do. So it achieves some of our goals, but it doesn't achieve or it doesn't necessarily incentivize use or disincentivize other types of use as this stands. But it is potentially a first step. Guy.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the idea for sure, and it is a solution. I don't know if, implementing it, I just don't know if the community is going to take on that risk. Even though, if we do it ourselves, we're still in the muni, and I think they'd be very averse to taking on that risk. So if it didn't pass the assembly or is vetoed, and then, I don't know if, I just worry about the assembly not allowing it because of the risk involved with the dispute and, everything that could go on with fines and then continuing, increased fines. So that seems like a big hurdle to me.
Sorry, Guy, could you say a little bit more about what you mean by risk? Do you mean the risk of legal action against the meeting?
Yes.
Right,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
They're putting a lot into the game and not getting much out of it except for Girdwood, if it's not area wide.
Well, just to go a little bit further on something I said before, one of the options is not to make this a Girdwood specific thing, but to make it specific on a set of conditions that happen to apply to Girdwood. So rather than saying this would only apply to Girdwood, you say this only applies to communities that have a high density of short-term rentals, then define that in some way. Girdwood has the highest density, so if you set the threshold right, it would only apply to Girdwood, but maybe in 2 years it would apply to South Addition as well, or downtown, or maybe somewhere else. So that way it's a recognition that, if you have a handful of short-term rentals in an area, it has some impact, but when you've got hundreds in a small area, it has much, much greater impact. And that's where this regulation would then be turned on. But it wouldn't be specific to Girdwood, it would just happen to only apply to Girdwood. It's a slightly different way of doing it. That's something that seems to have had a little bit more traction than saying it's a Girdwood specific proposal.
Right. No, yeah, I get that. And yeah, that makes sense. I just, Muni would still have some skin in the game, I would think. And they're kind of risk adverse. So not to shoot it down, just a thought of, I think that's still going to be a big hurdle.
Well, we are stuck in the space. If we can't pass legislation ourselves, we're not a legislative body. The Assembly is, and that's the only one we have.
Yeah.
Where we are now. Brett, you had your hand up.
Right, there are several things in that. And one immediate takeaway was that it's apparent that Girdwood needs to set our own program parameters, because when this was run up through the Assembly, our goals were entirely different. They had a different reason for wanting to do this than we did. And I've already heard some conflict in the debate as to some of the details in the program and what that might lead to as far as goals. And so my takeaway was Girdwood needs to be the one discussing in detail what the program parameters would be. because that's going to affect the outcome. So I would encourage us to take that in rather than to push that out to be a wider program. But I wanted to step back because it was mentioned whether or not this is actually a legal use. I've heard arguments on both sides of this that it's not a stipulated and allowed land use. Therefore, it would be considered not allowed or against the law. There is also the interpretation that anything can be done on a piece of land, even though there are some preclusions like building a fire or other type of commercial activities that might be precluded. So that debate is central to what we're talking about because those land uses have impacts. So as far as getting down to tactically how you make something like that go, we either dictate within the zoning areas that short-term rentals is allowed by right. And so we would put that in every land zoning definition. That's one way. The other is to generically say that it's available in all land uses in all zoning districts. And we could do that by declaration of doing an overlay. That would then pull all of that land use under some kind of regulatory regime just by the mere fact that that land use activity is occurring. Another way that we can maybe address this is like downtown did it, where they decided to have a special service area, if you will, tax improvement district, if you will. But they register everybody who's doing commercial operation down in that area. And then they all put in some money to the service area to have ambassadors or flowers or cleaning and things of that nature. So that model has been used in the municipality as a business model to collecting fees and providing a service in the area. So that's something else that could be explored. But I came back to why. Why are we doing this? Because we want to be able to encourage people to potentially move from short-term rental use in the market to long-term rental use in the market. And so this type of registration lets us at a time in the future change the fees, change the program, and encourage people to self-select on whether, if we believe that there were far too many of them and everybody wanted to have less of them, then we would do it by regulation and taxation. And this is the vehicle by which that is done. I think that in the beginning, it should be easy. It should be very low cost. It should sustain that program, and it should mitigate the impacts directly to those neighbors that are involved. I think as time goes on, it should be a service area driven activity because our service area enjoys the economic activity of a destination where people want to do this short-term rental accommodation buying, that type of market. So we have to be sensitive to that. And this lets us turn the dials at our pace.
Crystal?
I was just saying, thinking that I believe we should invite somebody from the planning department to our next GHAC meeting and have the discussion specifically about their suggestion on overlay versus chapter 9 amendments and hear what they think. And then we would go from there. I think like we need them to be involved to really know what direction we should. I would hate to be spending months and months to put something through and they think it's just another way.
Just want to clarify that zoning overlay concept is in Title 21 and would appear in Chapter 9.
Well, I think even if that is the case, like, I mean, I need somebody to explain it to me. They can talk like a regular person and not like a code. And because codes are confusing. Huh?
Don't talk to Polly, you don't.
There's already a thing in code about it. It's called a special improvement district or something.
That's a very different thing. And
Yeah.
actually can.
And that might be the best.
Tim, can you wait?
In my hands up.
Brianna's next.
I just want to say in interest of time too, 'cause when you opened this, Mike saying we have these two resolutions, is there a way we can say today, we've already sent these to the assembly? Right?
So the resolutions we passed before, they've already been passed. They're just there for discussion. We don't
Okay.
have to take any action tonight. It's just to start a discussion
Okay.
and to try and set an approach to address this.
yeah, since May right now would be really great if we could do it by January, have it in place, but that might be pretty fast. I don't know what the pace should
Do you mean
be.
4 months ago?
No, we're already too late. Next January, but do we need to write a new resolution someday soon that says, like your suggestion of the high density percentage? I think that's a very great suggestion. I think assembly members who represent parts of Anchorage would completely agree that they might like that idea in 4 years or 4 months or a while ago. But I don't really have anything else. I just wanted to ask and suggest if we needed to do something in the next few minutes with the resolutions.
There's nothing we need to do at the moment with the resolutions. They're already passed as is. This is a broad,
Yeah.
this is a general discussion about how we approach this problem. What I'm gathering, sorry, I'll go to Larry, then Matt.
Playing devil's advocate, my first meeting, once I was put on board, the subject was on the agenda, and it was by far the highest attendance of the general public, and the overwhelming number of people, in fact, I think essentially all the people that spoke were in opposition to registering STRs. So my question is, does this general body feel that that's, given that kind of response, public response, is this something do we feel there's, a drive from the community to move forward to regulate STR? And personally, I think that there should be, but that didn't seem to be what I heard from the public. That's my issue.
Yeah, I brought that up last time too. The exact same thing. Everything
You
you
want
heard was.
Matt next, and then if you want to speak after Tim, speak.
Yeah, sorry, different concepts. So sorry. I didn't want to take away from the discussion, so continue that if you wanted.
So that's just, does anyone else want to comment on this?
Could I offer that in other meetings I had heard, not at that one in particular, but it was quite one way, I would say, the opinions. I've heard others express an opinion that they were really frustrated with, like, parking or, noise or however that goes. And there's some areas that they were having problems, with that. And it seems to be really consistent. And that seemed to be a vocal contingent. And I think that's what led, correct me if I'm wrong, to some of the resolution that was reached last December from some of the neighbors wanting to get a handle on it. So I don't know if that one meeting had everybody there.
Slight change in same subject, but slight different matters. When I think about the short-term housing issue too, and the registration is that there are some, if we agree upon registration, there are some townhomes and homes that it won't matter to, because they make whatever money they make, and $300 is nothing, and the $500 penalty is probably nothing to them. But when we think about the regulation, is that there's like the Airbnb that's behind my house, which is probably the marginal, right? And like, because it's old and it's, and if we're creating rules and regulations, it goes to how do we create the rules to incentivize that marginal short-term rental to convert to a long-term rental? Because when we had a discussion with Big Sky or whatever it was, they did an incentive program, but what happened was the people that used the incentive program were the old marginal rentals. Those are the ones that were converted. And if we had, through our rules, a way to kind of shift some of those, I don't know whether it's 5, whether it's 15, whether it's 30, I'd like the program to see if it can nudge those to long-term rentals.
Tim, did you have anything to add?
So is this meeting over in 5 minutes?
Maybe if someone moved to adjourn and we accept.
I got a train of thought, if I could camp on that real quick, the question of regulation, whether or not we need to do it, that's fundamental to the discussion, right? So that's the next topic too, the discussion on ADU regulation proposed by GHEC. But it's actually not that we were proposing so much of a regulation, but that was, say, living up to the Title 21, Chapter 9 intent of accessory dwelling units, So we posited, should we limit those to, 30-day minimum rental? And so that's another mechanism by which we can reach our goals of more long-term rentals on maybe some of the marginal STRs by having those 8 accessory dwelling units be used for their intent. And that was for seasonal occupation, seasonal employee type stuff. So I guess the big question is, well, if we don't want to regulate it, I guess this would follow that we wouldn't want to have any regulations for any dwellings at all. And therefore, we will just, let the market dictate the availability of long-term rental units for folks. Or we look at a regulation regime that would allow us the dials to turn if we wanted to affect that market in the future. So that's how I boil down the fundamental argument.
I still think we come back to this. We need to have a meeting separate simply for this. This is, we spent a little bit of time on this, but we need to spend a lot of time on this. I hesitate to pass a regulation just for regulation's sake and make sure that if it is done, it's done right. And you don't have, open a can of worms that you didn't think about.
Yeah.
Thank you. I would just add, and thank you for all of your questions and points that throughout months and months of our meetings and then listening to out of state and other ski towns around the world and all the places in the nation that are experiencing STRs. And years ago in Hawaii, when you're going there, they've already been dealing with regulations, and it's not easy, and it's a growing pain that not everyone loves it, but we kind of have to do something that would then incentivize long-term rentals by having short-term rental regulations. So in listening to that first meeting of yours, it sounded to me, I was only listening, that some of them seemed to be not very informed about the process. So there were some corrections and reactions, but most people, I think, that would understand that in the market that we're living in this valley, that we kind of have to just do something, we have to do something. And it's not easy and not everyone will love it, but nothing makes everyone happy. But whenever you travel in this country or outside, there's all these fees on top of Airbnbs, and they're all being regulated in places that are desirable to be, like here in Ski Town. Mike?
Yeah. I'm really surprised that we're having any discussion about whether it's necessary or not. It's been necessary for about 4 or 5 years at least. And it's just one of the many frustrations of being Girdwood and stuck within a municipality that we've been prevented from doing so. So I think if people are still questioning whether there's any need for regulation, they're either very focused on their own pocketbook issues because they're hosting short-term rentals, or they're not paying any attention to what is done to this community. So I think that horse was left a long while ago. We're just trying to catch up on. We were sort of stuck behind the assembly while they spent 82 years coming up with this proposal, and that prevented us from doing anything. Now they've failed to pass this. We can at least use the work they've taken on to use that as part of a registration scheme. I agree that we have the additional benefit of being able to make short-term rental an actual legal explicit use within Title 21, Chapter 9, and we should do that. Maybe with some nuance around it as well. But if we make that a legal use, then we put everything on a very clear setting. We can say, what is and what isn't valid within that use, or what's encouraged, what's discouraged, and then potentially put further things onto that in the future. But I think a combination of the work that's been done so far, but tailoring it to what our needs are, and changes to Chapter 9, Title 21 are the way to go. I think the discussion about whether we need to or not is really, red herring. We need to. It's just how we do it. That's the question we need to be addressing now, not whether.
Are you guys familiar with what's going on in Maui with short-term rentals?
Yeah.
And over there, what happened is there was the same thing that happened in a lot of places, and they just started doing it in areas that really weren't legal to do it in. And now they're trying to blanket just take back I think, 10,000 units out of the market by anybody that's in an apartment zoned area is going to lose their short-term rental starting in next year. And they passed it already. And so it's got the whole market in turmoil, but that's what they did that under a zoning thing, like you said, so that if it was zoned appropriately, they could still have short-term rentals. If it wasn't zoned appropriately, like it was like single-family house zoned or something, then it's just not allowed.
So
And
the problem, I think that we identified this like 5-6 years ago. The problem with a lot of communities is they haven't done anything. They didn't put any registration process in. You basically let things just explode with no regulation, no guardrails, and it becomes such a problem that then it's pushed back significantly. We wanted to try and avoid that. We haven't been able to do that because, again, we can't pass any regulations ourselves. We can only ask nicely. So we've been stuck in a situation where there's zero regulation at the moment. You have to pay taxes, but that's it. So there's no regulation at all around it. And now we're trying to sort of, put the toothpaste back in the tube to some extent. And there's ways of doing that. But, it's not going to result. I don't think anybody realistically is expecting a total ban or even a total ban in certain zones. That's not a realistic.
well, that's kind of
Not realistic here.
but that's what they've done.
That's what they've done in Maui. It's not realistic here.
Yeah, no,
Partly because it hasn't got as bad as it has in Maui. Matt, and then
If I could just speak to that, I think one of the other issues that in Maui is because of the Lahaina situation, at least the way I read it, is because, there's housing available, but nobody can get a hold of long-term, longer-term rentals. And so, it's a how are we going to solve this from way outside of anybody's imagination. Anyway.
there are other communities that also gone ahead with the family.
my point was they went to a zoning situation to solve it.
Yeah.
Okay, if it was zoned hotel, then it was allowed. And if it was zoned apartment or residential, then it wasn't.
Yeah.
That's their pick. I'm not saying that's right, but why, that's what they're doing.
Same thing.
Yeah, so,
Matt, you had your hand up?
I would just say it quickly, I think if we start drafting rules and we start getting pushback, my sense there'll be more screaming from outside the community than inside the community. Because I just think that there'll be a lot of people in Anchorage or out of state that will catch wind if we hear people.
Absolutely. And that's it. That's going to be a very interesting political problem because we have, 10 assembly members who don't represent anything, any part of Girdwood, and only will have hosts in their constituents.
Yes.
But I presume they're interested in the impact on the municipality as a whole and all communities within the municipality, not just the people who vote for or against them. We did originally intend to have this meeting go on until around 6-ish. So if anybody wants to adjourn, this might be a good one. But Brett has his hand up, and I think Brett is probably going to do something more substantive.
No, that's fine. Just continue on.
I don't think we're going to reach a conclusion tonight. I think it's good that we started this discussion.
Can we ask the planning department to join our next meeting, our next JHAC meeting, so that we can have them on to ask questions?
I did request them to be here at this meeting, to at least attend. They were unable due to scheduling conflicts, but did suggest that we provide them with written questions if we had any. Kind of go from there. I think kind of the sort of some of my takeaways in that is trying to get a structure for regulation. And I think that the unexplored option would be an improvement district. Something like downtown partnership, but the point is that I was going to bring up is that we really are a service area. And and I think the tie-in is land use. If people are engaged in this land use within this service area, that could be subject to STR registration. And it's that simple. And I think that by keeping it here to the service area, that the service area should administer and perform on and deliver its program. I think that those decisions should be held locally to the committee. And I think that the ability for the Anchorage Downtown Partnership to function fully, I think can be replicated within a service area model. So I think we should ask that.
Since you brought up the issue of improvement districts, I think it's important to just point out what an improvement district is and how it's different from a service area. The service area is about service to the community. An improvement district is about service to a specific set of individuals who are using that service. The funding model is different. It's not done through property taxes, it's done through a separate assessment. It's not a one person, it's not a one voter, one vote. It's a improvement district is always set up where you assess a calculation of how much someone will benefit from the service, and then they are charged proportional to that benefit. And they also have a vote proportional to that benefit. So if 30% of the benefit goes to one person, they get 30% and pay 30% of the cost. It's a very different service area. You have to have a direct nexus between people paying the costs and receiving the benefit. So if we have a structure where we're saying short-term rental hosts pay the costs for the benefit in the community as a whole, that will not work as an improvement district. So fundamentally, that model is not a good alignment with what we're trying to do with short-term rentals, unless what we're trying to do is market short-term rentals, increase the profitability, in which case that is the goal. But I don't think that's really where we're coming from. We're looking at a community service to benefit the community as a whole. So it really has to be under the service area. And that's one of the reasons Proposition 7 to give us the option to do this kind of thing.
Well, under that logic, I think that then the only beneficiary could be those who contributed into the service area, which would be a fallacy of logic. I would only have to say that the benefits to the entire service area, let's say people take an assessment for a road. In this case, we're going to take an assessment on through a regulatory regime, which we don't get in the bed taxes, and that doesn't benefit our local area necessarily. Arguable that a small percentage might. But when that STR regulation is done, those fees are collected, the benefit to the service area is under the service area charge, which is housing and economic development. So that would apply to the entire service area. How that's capitalized, we may debate. However, I don't think we can preclude its use in the service area. Those registration fees of STR.
I think
it cannot be precluded to only be used for the benefit of property owner participating in short-term rentals.
I think there's a confusion. What I'm saying is the service area is the model we have to use because the improvement district has a set of conditions which cannot achieve. You have to use the service area.
Right. Right. And getting there is a great challenge. And I think the opportunity that's in front of our community. So I look forward to solving.
Agreed. Thank you. Jennifer?
I was going to say, I'd move to adjourn. This is a good conversation, but we have LUC imminent, so.
I assume the second. Thank you very much, everybody. Great. Thanks. Really good meeting.
Is your guys' meeting at 6 or 7? Oh. I thought it was at 6. How's this going?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.